The crisis at Little Rock High School, 1957. Now, I'm sure most of you will remember this pretty well because I think you were all really engaged in it when you were doing this in class, and it's a really easy story to remember. But remember, the questions ask why, so it's no good just repeating the story and describing what happens there. You only get so many marks for that. You need to be able to say why the event happened. Now, the reason for the crisis at Little Rock High School was because of the Brown v Topeka Board of Education crisis. Because what happened there was the Supreme Court declared that segregation in schools was now illegal. The problem was Eisenhower didn't set any type of deadline, so the southern states were really dragging their heels in trying to desegregate the schools. Because as we know, the South are really racist and they didn't want to have black and whites in the same school. So in 1957 in Arkansas, 9 children tried to attend Little Rock High School. They tried for 3 weeks to get into Little Rock High School, and these children became known as the Little Rock Nine. What happened was Orville Fabus, who became a bit of a hero in the South, refused to let these black African American students into a school with white students. And of course, the Southerners, who were very racist, came out in support of this. Not all of the children completely agreed with this, let me add, but a lot of them did. A lot of them didn't want to go to school with black children. So what happened was, after 3 weeks of them trying to get in, and they couldn't get in because the National Guard had been called out by Fabus to stop them going in, Eisenhower decided to act decisively. So he sent 1,100 paratroopers, or federal troops, American troops, call them what you like, basically sent people in who would have been in the American Army to escort these black African Americans into school. Having said that, the first day they get to go in, they do go in round the back in by a delivery entrance. So to be honest, it was still very difficult for them to get in. Now, those troops stayed till November, and then the National Guard were made to stay for a whole year with them in lessons. But you can imagine the racism was really, really difficult for these children to contend with. Now, only 1 of them actually managed to graduate in the end, and 8 of them left after a year because they just thought the racism was too much and they just couldn't learn there in that type of atmosphere. Elizabeth Eckford, who was one that left after a year, she had somebody spat in her face and people were threatening to lynch her as she walked into school. So things were really, really difficult for these children. Now, there's some consequences of what happened here, because unfortunately there were some positives for the Southern whites. The KKK membership went through the roof, because obviously they were in total support of these black African Americans not going into the school. 4 of the parents of the Little Rock Nine also lost their jobs, which was really unfortunate. And Orville Fabus became some sort of hero in the South because he stuck up for Southern rights. The problem was as well is when Little Rock High School shut and then reopened again as a desegregated school, only 3% of the pupils were actually black African Americans. So it showed really that although desegregation had happened, it was still pretty difficult to get it to happen in the South. Some positives, however, or a small victory that came out of this, was 1 did finally manage to graduate. No matter how bad it was, 1 pupil did graduate from that high school. Another thing that it did is because it was televised and it was absolutely horrific, the sorts of things that were going on, it was also shown all over the world every night, it did start to force the southern states to desegregate the schools a little bit quicker because there was some pressure put on by the government because of the state of what had been happening there. And it's important to remember that although Eisenhower acts, he doesn't act to help the black African Americans. In reality, the only reason President Eisenhower acts like he does, it was the Little Rock High School crisis, is because they were going against federal law, and that is American law. Because it was set in law that schools would be desegregated, and this had not happened in the South. So when they were failing to follow those rules, Eisenhower had no choice but to send in federal troops. So Little Rock High School is a bit of both a victory for black African Americans and showing some slight progress, but it's also showing the deep racism that still exists in the South in America.